The fastest way to learn is not by memorizing, but by playing with ideas until they feel natural. Try to explain them out loud as if you were teaching a child. If you need to memorize, it's because you haven't understood. And if you haven't understood, you haven't learned. This method is a trap. You might be able to repeat words, but you won't truly understand anything. And when an exam, or life itself, demands that you use that knowledge, it simply won't be there. But here's the secret. Whenever you learn something new, don't be satisfied with just storing it in your head. Speak it out loud. Explain it. Teach it. If there's no one around, teach it to yourself. Talk to yourself in your room, in the car, while you walk, even in the shower. Turn thoughts into words. When you can speak clearly and naturally, as if you were explaining it to someone else, that's when the knowledge becomes yours. Listen carefully. There's one infallible sign that someone truly understands an idea: the ability to make it simple. Anyone can hide behind complicated words, but only those who really understand can explain with clarity. Let me put it clearly. If you can't explain it simply, you haven't understood it. Repeating complex terms might impress the uninformed, but it doesn't fool reality. If you can't simplify it, you don't master it. When a concept still feels confusing, tangled with too many loose details, the problem isn't the subject itself. The problem is how you organized it in your mind. But when you can take that same concept and translate it into direct, logical, and accessible words, then you've reached true understanding. And here's the central point. Simplicity doesn't weaken knowledge, it strengthens it. The simpler it is, the more essential. The more essential, the more unforgettable. Information stops being a burden you carry and becomes a tool you can use anytime. That's why the greatest scientists, philosophers, and geniuses always sought clarity. They knew the mind doesn't need to drown in complexity. The mind needs to see the structure. When you learn to do this, you don't just understand better, you never forget. That is the path of real learning, not accumulating words, but distilling until only what matters remains. Every time you explain something, you strengthen your mind. It's like a muscle that doesn't grow at rest, but under challenge. Explaining is that challenge. It forces the brain to organize, review, connect, and test what it has learned. Think about it. When you only read or listen, you're in a passive position. It's as if information flows through you without taking root. But when you force yourself to teach, even if it's only to yourself, your mind changes gears. You leave the passive mode and enter the active one. You're no longer just receiving, you're producing, creating clarity. And here's the magic. In this process, the brain reveals what you still don't understand. If you get stuck, if you can't explain a detail, that means you've uncovered a gap in your knowledge. And that's wonderful, because now you know exactly where to improve. You're no longer in the dark. At the same time, every time you manage to explain something clearly, something powerful happens. The knowledge sticks. It takes deep root. It stops being a temporary visitor and becomes a permanent part of your mental structure. That's why, once you explain something well, you'll rarely forget it afterward. This cycle, learn, explain, correct, and fix, is what accelerates your growth in any area. The more often you repeat it, the stronger your mind becomes. It's like training every day. With discipline, you reach results that seem impossible to those who never practice. And this is exactly how the greatest thinkers reached the level of genius. They didn't memorize, they didn't pile up dead information. They turned explanation into their training ground. And with every explanation, they became faster, clearer, and deeper. Now, I want you to understand something fundamental. This method shouldn't be used only once in a while. It must become a daily habit. The secret isn't in long study sessions, but in constant repetition, in training your mind during small intervals. You don't need hours of absolute silence or perfect conditions. On the contrary, great learners use any moment. If you're waiting for a bus, explain quietly what you just studied. If you're walking, teach yourself the concept you learned earlier that morning. If you're alone in your room, speak out loud as if you were giving a lesson. These stolen minutes of the day are hidden treasures. Most people waste them getting lost in useless distractions. You, however, can use them as a training ground for your brain. It's in these moments that knowledge solidifies, because you're not just reviewing, you're organizing and simplifying. But understand this, you don't need to be perfect. Many times you'll stumble, forget, get stuck, and that's exactly where the power lies. Those stumbles reveal the gaps you still need to strengthen. With each attempt, you come back sharper, clearer, more confident. When this becomes a habit, something extraordinary happens. You start to think differently. Your mind becomes trained to seek clarity in everything. You begin to organize ideas automatically, to separate the essential from the unnecessary, to communicate better without effort. And all of this is born from simple minutes scattered throughout the day. This is how a sharp mind is built, not through endless hours of forced memorization, but through small, constant rituals of explanation. A little every day, anywhere, always. Now pay very close attention, because this can change the way you deal with procrastination. Whenever you feel stuck, unmotivated to start, use this method as an immediate action trigger. Instead of waiting for the right time to study or work, simply begin by explaining what you need to learn. When you explain out loud, your mind is forced to focus. It can't wander, it can't drift away. You cut through the cycle of procrastination because speaking demands presence. It's impossible to procrastinate while you're producing clarity. And here's a transformative detail. Say out loud phrases that reprogram your mind not to procrastinate. Declare, I act now. I don't postpone. I make it happen. When you hear your own voice, you create a powerful internal command. It's as if your brain is forced to believe it and obey. That's the trick. Don't wait for motivation to act. Create movement, and motivation will follow. As you hear yourself explaining, you generate an immediate sense of progress. You realize you already know something, that you've already advanced. That small step builds confidence, and confidence builds action. Procrastination is born from confusion, from the feeling that something is too big or too difficult. But when you explain, everything breaks down into simple parts. What once seemed like an insurmountable monster suddenly becomes a clear sequence of steps, and in that moment, fear disappears. The great geniuses never waited for inspiration to fall from the sky. They created clarity first, and clarity pulled everything else forward. That's exactly what you must do. Whenever you feel stuck, stop and explain. Teach yourself out loud, even if it's just for 60 seconds. That single minute is enough to break inertia and put you into motion. And once movement begins, procrastination loses its power. You're no longer a hostage to feeling like it because you've already created discipline. Now listen closely, because here's the point that separates the average student from someone who learns in an extraordinary way. The brain truly learns when it recreates. In this process, you discover paths that were never in the book, explanations even the teacher never gave, metaphors that make sense only to you. Knowledge stops being external and becomes something shaped by your own mind. That's why geniuses seem to see the world differently. They don't memorize ready-made formulas. They reinvent, simplify, adapt. They turn every concept into something alive. And when you do this, you learn in a way that is never the same as anyone else, because no one else will ever explain it with the same words you used. Think about it. If you can explain the law of gravity with a falling apple, or explain a math formula using an example from your daily life, it means you've mastered it. You no longer depend on the original way you received the information. You own it. This is how you must learn from now on. Don't copy, recreate. Don't memorize, explain. Don't repeat, transform. That is the mark of great thinkers, and it's what will place you far above average. Now listen with your full attention. If you take this method seriously, if you truly commit to teaching yourself every single day, something extraordinary will happen. You will leap far ahead of most people. While the majority remain stuck in rote memorization, repeating words without understanding, you'll be building real knowledge, solid and unshakable. While others study for hours and forget the next day, you'll learn in minutes and remember forever. While they feel insecure, you'll stand with confidence, clarity, and mastery. That is the power of teaching yourself, the power of simplifying, of recreating, of turning the difficult into the easy. It's what separates those who merely get by from those who become true references. It's what turns an ordinary student into someone brilliant, capable of mastering any subject and applying it in real life. And here's the truth. You don't need to be a genius to learn like a genius. You need discipline, effort, and the courage to practice a method that seems almost too simple to be true. And that's precisely why so few ever use it. But those who do surge ahead. So let me tell you this. Every time you get up and dedicate a few minutes to teaching yourself, you're gaining ground. You're building an advantage that compounds day after day until the world can no longer ignore you. That is the real power of. It's not about storing information in your head. It's about transforming information into clarity, clarity into action, and action into results. Do this, and you will never be the same again. Now I want you to make a pact. Write in the comments, "I choose to learn like a genius." This phrase is your declaration that you will no longer live in the mediocrity of rote memorization, but will transform every study session into clarity, every concept into mastery. And if this lesson resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and hit the like button to keep elevating your learning. And remember, those who teach, learn. Those who simplify, master. Those who practice this every day become unstoppable.